Hi, and welcome to my channel. In this video, I will be explaining about icebergs, but not just any iceberg. I will be explaining the Sherlock Holmes Iceberg, because today is May 22nd in Indonesia, and on this day, we celebrate Sherlock Holmes Day. And what a better way to celebrate than to go down the great detective's rabbit hole. With that being said, hold on to your deerstalker and keep your keen eyes open, and let's begin. Mrs. Holmes is Sherlock Holmes's mother. She was first mentioned on the BBC's Sherlock's first season episode 1, A Study in Pink. But her true first appearance is on the third season episode 1, The Empty Hearse. Mrs. Holmes and Mr. Holmes are played by actors Wanda Ventham and Timothy Carlton respectively, Benedict Cumberbatch's parents. The Great Mouse Detective is a 1986 American animated mystery adventure film produced by Walt Disney Pictures. The film was directed by John Musker, Ron Clements, Dave Michner, and Bernie Mattinson. The main characters are all mice and rats living in Victorian London. Based on the children's book series Basil of Baker Street by Eve Titus and Paul Galdun, it draws heavily on the tradition of Sherlock Holmes with a heroic mouse who consciously emulates the detective. I think this refers to a video uploaded by John Smith on YouTube called Who Lock? Sherlock Meets the Doctor. One thing I do know is that this whole crossover is fake.
Will you come away with me?
Who are you?
I'm the Doctor.
There are two Sherlock Holmes films directed by Guy Ritchie. The first film, simply titled Sherlock Holmes, was released in 2009, and a sequel titled Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows, in 2011. Both films featured Robert Downey Jr. as Sherlock Holmes and Jude Law as John Watson. Some people say that this film is quite good and worth watching. Enola Holmes is a 2020 mystery film directed by Harry Bradbeer from a screenplay by Jack Thorne, who adapted the first novel in Nancy Springer's Enola Holmes mystery series entitled The Case of the Missing Marquis, an Enola Holmes mystery. Enola Holmes is the teenage sister of the famous Victorian detective Sherlock Holmes. The film features Millie Bobby Brown as Enola, and Henry Cavill as Sherlock Holmes.
The game is afoot.
According to Wikipedia, canon of Sherlock Holmes is an attempt to distinguish between Doyle's original works and subsequent works by other authors using the same characters. Overall, the canon of Sherlock Holmes consists of 56 short stories and 4 novels fully written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Young Sherlock Holmes is a 1985 American mystery adventure film directed by Barry Levinson and written by Chris Columbus. The film depicts a young Sherlock Holmes and John Watson meeting and solving a mystery together at a boarding school. The film is notable for being the first full-length film to feature completely computer-generated characters created by Pixar. This film features Nicholas Rowe as Sherlock Holmes and Alan Cox as John Watson. Not to be confused with the manga series, Moriarty the Patriot, that I will be mentioning on the second tier. I think this refers to the manga adaptation of BBC's Sherlock. Joseph Bell was a Scottish surgeon and lecturer at the University of Edinburgh Medical School in the 19th century. He is best known as the inspiration for the literary character, Sherlock Holmes. According to the University of Dayton article on The Complicated Mind of Sherlock Holmes, it states that Sherlock Holmes is unique compared to an average human, but he is not a high-functioning sociopath. Holmes most likely suffers from Asperger's syndrome, a minor case of bipolar disorder, and a hint of Savant syndrome. Asperger's syndrome causes Holmes to think in pictures and desire a close companionship with Dr. Watson. According to castleofchaos.com, a 1999 book called The Intelligence of Sherlock Holmes and Other Three-Pipe Problems, Psychological Studies of the Great Detective and His Companion Dr. John H. Watson by John Radford, breaks down the psychological intelligence of Sherlock Holmes and John Watson, both of whom are widely accepted as above average IQ. Radford estimates Holmes's IQ at 190, which places him much higher than our crazy-haired scientist. Since then, he still remains one of the smartest characters ever written. The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes is a Canadian-British mystery TV series that originally aired from May 7, 1997, to May 7, 2000. The show was created by Ellis Eden and Phil Moore. The series follows the life of Sherlock Holmes, the great-great-niece of Sherlock Holmes who, with the help of ex-gang member Bo Sawchuk, tackles a variety of mysteries in and around the fictional city of Redington, Manitoba. On some occasions, she found herself matching wits with her nemesis, Molly Hardy. According to Screen Rant, as of January 1, 2023, every story about Sherlock Holmes penned by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is clearly and completely in the public domain under US federal law. So now, creators can freely develop new Sherlock Holmes adaptations and derivative works free from any claims by Arthur Conan Doyle's estate. Moriarty the Patriot, also known as Yukoku no Moriarty in Japanese, is a Japanese mystery manga series written by Ryosuke Takeuchi and illustrated by Hikaru Miyoshi, based on Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes series. It focuses on Holmes' nemesis, William James Moriarty. The anime television series adaptation is produced by Production IG.
Catch me if you can, Mr. Holmes.
A channel called T-Dose published a video titled, Creepy Watson. In the video, we can see that T-Dose was playing a demo version of a game Sherlock Holmes Nemesis, also known as Sherlock Holmes vs. Arsène Lupin. Basically, this video explained that there's a creepy bug in the game which affects Holmes' trusty sidekick, Watson. In certain areas, when Watson leaves your line of sight, he teleports closer to you, reappearing just off-screen. This is a stalker entity which does the same thing, along with a hostile version which kills you if your back is turned long enough. Eurus Holmes is the younger sister of Mycroft Holmes and Sherlock Holmes, who was completely unknown to Sherlock until her reveal in The Lying Detective, which is the second episode of the 4th season of BBC's Sherlock. Not much is known about her other than this. From what I've read, in the DC universe, Sherlock Holmes is largely considered the father of modern criminal investigation. His first appearance in the DC universe was in Hit Comics number 29, which was published in September 1943. In my search for this entry, I found 3 different versions of Russian Sherlock Holmes. The first version is The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. It is a series of Soviet television films portraying Arthur Conan Doyle's fictional English detective, starting in 1979. They were directed by Igor Maslenikov and starring Vasily Livanov as Sherlock Holmes and Vitaly Solomin as Dr. Watson. The second version is Sherlock Holmes, which is a Russian television crime drama series based on the Sherlock Holmes detective stories by Arthur Conan Doyle, and aired in November 2013. It stars Igor Petrenko as Sherlock Holmes and Andrei Panin as Dr. John Watson. And the third version of Russian Sherlock Holmes is Sherlock in Russia, also known as Sherlock, The Russian Chronicles. This is a Russian detective TV series based on Arthur Conan Doyle's stories about the legendary detective Sherlock Holmes. This is the first Russian Sherlock Holmes TV series with an original script. The series was released in October 2020 on the Start.au streaming service. This refers to a 60 minutes pilot episode for the BBC's Sherlock which was never broadcast. The pilot follows the same plot as the first episode of the first season, A Study in Pink, and was originally intended to be the first episode of the show. However, the BBC decided that they wanted Sherlock to have 90-minute episodes and asked the team to remake it. The pilot episode was subsequently released as an extra on the series DVDs. Arsène Lupin vs. Sherlock Holmes is the second collection of Arsène Lupin stories written by Maurice Leblanc, featuring two adventures following a match of wits between Lupin and Sherlock Holmes. The character, Sherlock Holmes, is a transparent reference to Sherlock Holmes. Joseph Frank Buster Keaton was an American actor, comedian, and filmmaker. He is best known for his silent film work, in which his trademark was physical comedy accompanied by a stoic, deadpan expression that earned him the nickname, the Great Stone Face. I think the reason he's on this iceberg is because of the 1924 American silent comedy film called Sherlock Jr. This film was directed by and starring Buster Keaton and written by Clyde Bruckman, Gene Harves, and Joseph A. Mitchell. This refers to the ending scene of the last episode of the fourth season of BBC's Sherlock entitled, The Final Problem. Since I haven't seen season 4 yet, I asked r/Sherlock Discord server users and this is one of their opinion about this entry. One user said, quote, "Maybe it means that the final problem made him realize how mentally vulnerable he is. Also, he starts to remember all his childhood memories and he understands that all of the memories he had were partly made up by his brain. So, this episode shows that his memories are something rational he was supposed to be sure of. Sherlock is, in my opinion, someone who needs something rational to rely on. So, this episode made him lose his mind in a way." This refers to fan theories suggesting that Moriarty in the BBC's Sherlock had a twin brother. According to some, the first clue to this arrived in the very first episode, A Study in Pink. In it, the cabbie tells Sherlock that he's just a man, but there's so much more, which some have interpreted as a clue of Jim Moriarty having a twin brother. Next is the swimming pool scene in Season 1's finale, The Great Game, where Moriarty says he's so changeable, another clue pointing at him having a twin. But the truth is that the theory doesn't hold water at all. Geoffrey Whitehead is a British actor who played Sherlock Holmes in the TV series Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson between 1979 and 1980 with Donald Pickering as Dr. Watson. In 1999, he played Professor Moriarty in the TV show The Newly Discovered Casebook of Sherlock Holmes with Roy Hudd as Sherlock Holmes and Chris Emmett as Dr. Watson. This 50-pence coin was released into circulation in 2019 on what would have been the 160th birthday of Arthur Conan Doyle's, the author who created Sherlock Holmes. The 50p coin was designed by Stephen Raw and features the profile of the fictional detective, who's wearing his iconic deerstalker hat and smoking pipe. It's also got tiny inscriptions of the titles of books in the Sherlock Holmes series behind the silhouette too. What a better way to commemorate the author's most famed work than with a coin of the character and book titles to match. This refers to a 2010 British-American steampunk mystery film directed by Rachel Lee Goldenberg, and produced by independent American film studio The Asylum. The film details an unrecorded case in which eccentric detective Holmes and his companion Dr. Watson investigate a series of unusual monster attacks and a plot to destroy London. It stars Gareth David Lloyd as Dr. Watson, Ben Sidder as Sherlock Holmes and Dominic Keating as the villain, Spring-Heeled Jack. A Quora user, Tarun Kumar, said that there are some few cases in which Holmes failed to achieve his objective. They are, A Scandal in Bohemia, The Adventure of the Yellow Face, The Five Orange Pips, The Adventure of the Engineer's Thumb, and The Valley of Fear. Michael Pennington is a British actor who played in 1987, a cryogenic Sherlock Holmes who wakes up in the 20th century in the TV movie The Return of Sherlock Holmes with Margaret Collin as Jane Watson, a descendant of the original Dr. Watson, and in 1993, Pennington was the voice of James Moriarty in the episode The Empty House of the radio series The BBC Presents Sherlock Holmes with Clive Merrison as Sherlock Holmes. There were a few Sherlock Holmes cartoons that aired in the 80s. Here are some of them: Sherlock Hound, the mentioned earlier The Great Mouse Detective, Sherlock Holmes and the Sign of 4, Sherlock Holmes and A Study in Scarlet, and Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd Century. Actually, both Sherlock Holmes and John Watson originally had different names, as shown by the surviving notes of Conan Doyle. The famous detective was initially named Sherlock Holmes, but Conan Doyle was convinced to change it. Sources vary as to what made him change the name to Sherlock Holmes, with some saying it was his wife who told him Sherlock Holmes wasn't a good name, while others explain that the stories of Sherlock Holmes were rejected. Dr. Watson, on the other hand, had an even weirder name, far from the final one everyone knows. According to Conan Doyle's notes, Dr. John Watson was initially named Ormond Sacker. Conan Doyle changed his mind before the publication of A Study in Scarlet. Exactly why he changed Watson's name is unknown, but many sources explain the name John Watson was most likely inspired by one of Conan Doyle's colleagues, Dr. James Watson. This refers to a four-act play by William Gillette and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle titled Sherlock Holmes, The Strange Case of Miss Faulkner. The play based on Conan Doyle's character Sherlock Holmes. Though the play was written at first by Arthur Conan Doyle in 1897, William Gillette rewrote it so much that the story is very different than the original one. After 3 previews, it premiered on November 6, 1899, at the Garrick Theatre in New York City. The Case of the Whitechapel Vampire is a non-canonical Sherlock Holmes film. The film was produced in 2002 for the Hallmark Channel as the last installment in a series of Hallmark Sherlock Holmes films. The story is about a series of murders at a monastery seemingly committed by a vampire in the same area as Jack the Ripper operated. It stars Matt Frewer as Sherlock Holmes and Kenneth Welsh as Dr. Watson.
Significant. A synonym for meaningful, which can be deconstructed into the phrase, sign if I can't, hence power of attorney.
According to scp-wiki.wiki.com, SCP-2475 is an anomalous phenomenon affecting the Conan Doyle, an upscale pub and restaurant located in Edinburgh, Scotland. The Conan Doyle was first established in 1873, but did not exhibit anomalous properties until 1987. Whenever any individual who has committed a violent crime enters the Conan Doyle and orders food or a drink, local authorities will be alerted to their location. The way in which they are alerted takes a variety of forms. Methods used in the past have included anonymous phone calls, emails, text messages, and even obsolete methods of communication such as telegraph messages. Despite numerous attempts, no form of communication used by SCP-2475 has been successfully traced back to a person or persons. According to the Lost Media Wiki, there are 2 separate 1914 silent Sherlock Holmes films were made under the title A Study in Scarlet, both of which were based off the 1887 Arthur Conan Doyle novel of the same title. One was made in the UK and was directed by George Pearson, while the other was made in the US and was directed by Francis Ford. Both versions have since become lost. The UK version released on December 28, 1914 and produced by Samuelson Film Manufacturing Company Limited, starring James Bradington as Sherlock Holmes. The US version released on December 29, 1914 and produced by Gold Seal, and the Universal Film Manufacturing Company Incorporated, starring Francis Ford as Sherlock Holmes. Murder on the Bluebell Line is an episode of the British TV series, QED, which aired on April 1, 1987. Directed by John Lynch, Murder on the Bluebell Line features Hugh Fraser as Sherlock Holmes, and Ronald Fraser as Dr. Watson investigating the mystery of the Piltdown Man, once thought to be the missing link in the evolution of man, but revealed in the 1950s to be a fraud. Sherlock Holmes Baffled is an American short motion picture silent film created in 1900 with cinematography by Arthur Marvin. It is the earliest known film to feature Arthur Conan Doyle's detective character Sherlock Holmes. Originally released for arcade amusement Mutoscope machines in 1900 and later copyrighted in 1903, Sherlock Holmes Baffled has a running time of 30 seconds. The only information known about Shades of Sherlock Holmes is this film, a 1972 short film directed by Ron Clements about Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, who investigates vampire attacks on the streets of London. Sherlock Holmes in Caracas is a 1991 Venezuelan film that was never released in theater or DVD. Directed by Juan Friesen, this film was starring Juan Manuel Montesinos as Sherlock Holmes and Gilbert de Cornan as Dr. Watson, and was produced by Big Ben Productions, Tuna Films, and Fonsign. The film is about Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson's journey to Venezuela to investigate reports of a vampire and a pagan cult. Sherlock Holmes and Hitler's Messenger of Death is a 2017 fictional historical mystery novel written by Petar Macek. Synopsis of this novel is, in the spring of 1937, Hitler talks of peace while taking actions to test the patience of the Western Allies. In Fulworth, England, the retired Sherlock Holmes is now cared for by a German migrant couple, the Steiners. Holmes, who is now more interested in beekeeping than detective work, is shocked by the suicide of a local youth he had mentored for 10 years. This event pulls him back into the world of crime and espionage, which has changed significantly with the advent of electricity, automobiles, and airships. Despite these changes, Holmes must confront a familiar enemy he first encountered over 40 years ago. This refers to Everett Kayser's Sherlock, the Game of Logic, which is a reflection video game developed by Everett Kayser themselves and published in 1991 for PC and Mac, in 2010 for iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch, in 2011 for Android, and in 2012 for Amazon app. The game is a computerized version of logic puzzles, where you're presented with a series of clues that help you to determine the exact locations of all of the images on the playing board. Sherlock Holmes and the Alien Abduction is a short story published by Philip Duke on November 19, 2011. The story is about a lost case of Sherlock Holmes and the Alien Abduction has been found. The case involves solving a mysterious death and preventing scandal involving a theosophical society. However, there is an unexplainable fact and a disturbing possibility that led Holmes told Dr. Watson to not publish the case until a century after Holmes's death. These details are revealed in the conclusion of the case, which sheds light on why Holmes was not satisfied with the outcome. The case was written up by Dr. Watson and stored in a locked safe box in the Bank of England's vault, where it was lost for many years before being discovered. A Black Sherlock Holmes is a 1918 American silent film written by C.N. David and directed by R.G. Phillips. The film was produced by Ebony Film Corporation. The film was later released in April 1918 in the US, starring Sam Robinson as Nick Garter and Rudolph Tatton as Rheumatism. The plot of the film is not related to the stories of Arthur Conan Doyle. Nick Garter is hired to find Sheeza Sneeze, who was kidnapped by the criminal Baron Jazz. All roles were played by black actors and actresses. The film is still in existence and kept by the Motion Picture Conservation Center of the American Film Institute collection in the Library of Congress, but most of the footage has been damaged. The Judkins Tragedy is a cartoon made by Arthur Conan Doyle during his college years in Stonyhurst around 1870 to 1875. It was probably published in the college magazine, The Wasp. The Judkins Tragedy was never completed, as Doyle told the literary staff of The Wasp that each could put his own conclusion to the story. The Story of a Bengal Tiger is a story written by a 4-year-old Arthur Conan Doyle. Doyle's explanation of this story was, quote, "I was 6 at the time, and have a very distinct recollection of the achievement. It was written, I remember, upon foolscap paper, in what might be called a fine bold hand 4 words to the line, and was illustrated by marginal pen and ink sketches by the author. There was a man in it, and there was a tiger. I forget which was the hero, but it didn't matter much, for they became blended into one about the time when the tiger met the man. Unfortunately, the full story has been lost. All is left of this story is a 30 words fragment that said, but each man carrying a knife, gun, pistol, we ran on till we came to a cave on the side of the rock, we rushed in, the first thing we saw was a fine Bengal." The only remaining evidence of this is a Reddit post on /creepypasta by user Nicosaurantris from August 5, 2020. Sherlock Holmes Hunts the Mothman is a pay-what-you-want comic written by Xavier Nelson Jr. and illustrated by J. Cody Lambert. The comic was split into 3 separate parts. The first part of the comic is about a suicidal Sherlock Holmes resolves to hunt down England's one other living legend before taking his own life, the tragically transformed youth known as the Mothman. The second one is about Sherlock Holmes continues his investigation into the existence of the Mothman, and discovers the home of Travis O'Flannery, an Irish farmer with a secret. And the final part is about before the events on the second part. Sherlock Holmes discovers the life and friendship shared between Travis O'Flannery and William Rott, the transformed boy also known as the Mothman. Sherlock Holmes and the Strange Mr. Angel is one of 3 short stories included in the book. 3 short stories of Sherlock Holmes written by John Escott. It was first published on January 1, 1982. The story is about Sherlock Holmes investigates the disappearance of a man named Mr. Angel. Miss Sutherland, a young woman with weak eyes, meets Sherlock Holmes in search of Mr. Angel. They were about to get married but Mr. Angel disappeared. He stopped writing to her, and she was worried. He explained the story to Holmes. Her mother married Mr. Windybank. He is younger than her. Miss Sutherland and her mother had £100 a year. They had no financial problems. Holmes becomes suspicious when he informs him that Mr. Angel and Mr. Windybank have never met. Holmes sent a letter to Mr. Windybank to see him. From the results of the reply to the letter, Holmes learned that the letter from Mr. Windybank was written on the same typewriter as the letter from Mr. Angel. Therefore, he can state that Mr. Windybank and Mr. Angel are the same person. Leo Ponce, the French filmmaker who is best known as the director of Le Hobbit, Le Retour du Roi du Cantal, has never made, directed, or starred in a film related to Sherlock Holmes. Well, he did direct a short film in 2012 called Barbit, L'Homme de la Situation, but it is not a Sherlock Holmes-related film under any circumstances. To my knowledge, no Sherlock Holmes film was released in 2012. The only Sherlock Holmes-related film released in 2012 was a fast-paced documentary directed by Gary Lang called The Real Sherlock Holmes, and the documentary doesn't star Leo Ponce at all. And that's it. I've explained all of the entries on the Great Detective's Iceberg. I may have made some mistakes in this video, since I'm not an expert Sherlockians and this is my first time making an iceberg video. So if you feel something is wrong or need some improvement, please let me know in the comments. See you on my next video. Have a great day and happy Sherlock Holmes Day.